Good afternoon and welcome. Today is the first in a four-part series by Starboard Consulting on Maximo Work Centers. Today, I am very pleased to introduce one of our featured presenters, Amy Tatum, as we launch into Maximo Work Center Security. Amy, welcome.
All right. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it. Glad to be back in our recurring series here. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on today's webinar. As Alex said, my name is Amy Tatum. I'm a Vice President and Technical Director for Starboard Consulting. And this year we celebrate 14 years at Starboard. It's hard to believe it's gone by that fast, but it's been a good run. We specialize in Maximo implementations. We do new installs, upgrades, training, integrations, GIS integrations. Pretty much if it involves Maximo, then Starboard can help you out with that. So we're also very heavily involved in the Maximo user community. I actually have my Maximo Utility Working Group mug with me today. And as part of that, we like to just stay engaged with our clients and the community. And this past year, we found that these coffee chats are a really good way to do that. We try to keep them short and on point, give you a lot of information in a short period of time. And of course, they're all available for replay after the fact. So if you missed one and you want to go back and look at it, you can certainly make that happen. So we're excited to be here and excited for some of the topics that we have coming up for you in the future. So today we're going to talk about work center security. And then going forward, a couple weeks ago, we started off with upgrades. It's a really important topic this year with end of support coming in September. So if you haven't already started planning for your upgrade or have it in progress, then definitely want to make sure that you get onto the 761 platform before the end of the year. So today, again, is Work Center Security. We're alternating these in a little bit of a technical and business fashion. So today's will be more technical oriented around what administrators might need to know. In a couple of weeks, we'll get back together and look at the inventory work center with a little bit of a business focus. And that one will be, I think, Lonnie off of our team, and she'll be joined by Thomas Knowles off the IBM team. After that, then we'll come back to the technical side of things and look at the MMI Work Center, and then again in March, we'll go back to the business side and look at the Administration Work Center. So super excited for the content that we have planned for you guys. Certainly, if you have other content that you'd like to see, we would love to hear from you. So you can put that in the chat with additional topics that you might like us to cover. So today I've got a new guest with me, and this is Daniel Jacobson. He is one of the guys on Starboard's absolutely amazing development team. And this is his first time webinar. So Daniel, thanks for joining me. And why don't you introduce yourself to the folks on the line?
Thanks, Amy. I'm Daniel Jacobson. I'm a Maximo consultant at Starboard. I've been at Starboard for about 4 years, and I've done implementations from utilities, facilities, oil and gas. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you. So I'd like to actually kick it off with a poll. So Alex, could you bring that up for us, please?
Yes, thanks, Daniel. So in the chat window, you should see your poll. We would love to hear a little bit more on what Maximo Work Centers are you currently using. Are they service requests, perform inspection, create inspection forms, work technician, work supervisor, inventory analyst, administration, or MMI? I see a lot of service requests, which is great. A little bit of MMI, inspections. All right. We'll give you just another couple seconds and then we'll close the poll. If you missed your chance, we'd love to hear from you. Just enter in the chat box. And thanks. We'll go ahead and end the poll and turn it back over to Daniel and Amy.
All right. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it. So let's go ahead and jump right in and talk about work centers. So right now with the 7612 release, there are 13 different work centers available. So as most of you know, these started coming out in one of the early 760 releases, and this is an area that IBM's invested a lot in, and they're continually adding to this functionality. One of the nice things about work centers is they are responsive, so you can use them on any form factor device, and they will automatically adjust and resize the screens and kind of redisplay for that. So whether you're on a laptop, a tablet, an iPhone, whatever device you may have, the work centers are responsive and will work in that environment. So as we look through that list of work centers, there's different things going on. From the poll, we saw service requests is a really popular one. Inspections is another pretty popular one. A lot of folks using the MMI, but you're going to have a different audience for each of those, and therefore different people that would have security to that. So if I'm a technician performing work, I want access to work execution. I probably don't need access to manage inventory. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is work center security, which has also changed quite a bit as the work centers have matured, and how you set that up is a little bit different. So I know I do that in the security groups application because that's where I set up all of my role-based security in Maximo. So let's talk about a little bit how that happens. So Daniel, can you tell us why the security in work centers is a little bit different in setup from what we see in the regular UI applications that we're used to?
Absolutely. So the reason you have a bit of a difference is that we initially had the original architecture was you would work through the application server and you would go through the classic UI layer and interact directly with the Maximo business objects, which would also update your database. So that's the way you'd historically work with these MBOs. So when you're working with a work center, what you need to do is the work center UI layer is the UI files, and you'll interact with your MBOs through the REST API. And the REST API works directly with object structures instead of directly with the MBOs. And then these object structures will control the MBOs and therefore update your database. So that's the biggest difference. And it really will be reflected in how we do our security changes.
Okay. So with the classic UI, I would be setting signature option access and just kind of that read insert, which affected what I could do with the business objects directly. But now I've got another layer that I'm going through with the REST API and the object structures. So I've got to grant security to that layer instead of just to the applications themselves, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So tell me more about these object structures. How do those work? I'm used to object structures from an integration perspective, data loads, things like that. So how do the work center object structures come to be?
So you have these special object structures that were created just for work centers, and they're all going to have this prefix MX API. So if you see anything that says MX API, just know that it's going to be used for work centers. And they're also all going to be used with integration.
Okay. That makes them easy to spot.
Exactly.
So work center security then. I know I need to go to security groups. I'm going to select my group that I want to grant access to and go to the applications tab. And then, I'm used to that, just looking at the application and having the boxes right there below on the lower part of that screen to check and uncheck and grant all. Thank goodness that button is around, because checking 100 and something options was very painful for a time there. But anyway, so what do I need to do instead if I'm setting work center security different from how I would set security in the regular UI?
So IBM has provided templates that will contain all your object structures and the permissions associated with them that you need to approve. And actually, we have a video that will kind of show how that works.
Oh, great. Let's look at that.
So here we're in the security groups application, and here we have a field work technician that we would be setting their permissions. So you go to the applications tab like you normally would expect to, and the difference is you want to filter for your work center application. So that type would be work center. And then when it comes up, you can see that here we have the work execution work center. Okay. And we have the option to manage your templates. And so here, this template can be applied to the group, and it's a strictly additive action. So any permissions you have won't be taken away by applying a template, but it will grant more more options that are needed to be able to work with that work center.
Okay. So that's way easier than it used to be. But how do I know what the template is doing, and how do I know that it did it correctly? I mean, that's a little bit of a black box, just hitting that apply template. So is there a way I can see behind the scenes what that's done, or if I need to make a tweak, maybe the template doesn't do exactly what I wanted it to do? Can I get in and see, do we have a demo of just kind of what happens behind the scenes on that?
We do, and that's a very good point that, before the templates came out, you would have to apply them one by one. So that was really a painful experience. And here we have an example that could show you how you could look and individually analyze what the template has granted your users. So if you look in here, we're back in our applications tab, and we're looking at the work execution template. And so if you look at the object structure authorizations, you can see that this work execution template has granted a total of 20 object structures. So and within each object structure, it's not necessarily granting all the permissions, but just a certain amount. And so you can look within these 20 object structures, and within each one, you can see granularly what is being applied.
And I do see that they're all starting with MX APIs, so I know those are all object structures tied to the work centers. Exactly.
So, and then in this example, this one is just providing read and save access for the WO detail and not insert or delete.
Okay.
And there's a different number of object structures that are required for different work centers. You'll have to look at each one, but I believe for other ones, there might be fewer or more than that.
Okay, well, cool. So, every now and then we get calls from clients that they can't see the work centers, or maybe they get some sort of error, they can't perform an action or things like that. So normally that's going to be a security issue. Is where you were basically reviewing those object structures, that's where I'm going to go to troubleshoot that type of thing, right?
That's correct. That's the best place to look. And another common thing to look out for is that not all work centers are listed under the work center type. Some of them will also be tools and tasks. So things like service requests that are intended to be used by multiple different people might be a tool and task, whereas the things on work center are more geared towards a very specific role.
Okay, so execution, technician, supervision, things like that are geared towards specific people within my organization are going to be work centers. The more generic stuff, the map, the MMI, the service requests, things like that are geared towards a wider audience, I'm going to find under tools.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, well, I don't know that it makes any sense, but at least we know what we're looking for. So, but, all right, well, thanks for that information. Let's go over to the chat and see what kind of questions we might have that have come up. So the first one here, we've got one, whether or not work centers work in an offline mode.
No, right now you need to be connected to work with the work centers.
Yeah. So they're great. They do require constant connectivity. I think, if I remember correctly, the inspection one through Anywhere is coming in an offline mode if it's not already out. But the rest of them do require just a connected capability. But that connection can be anything. It can be cellular, it can be Wi-Fi, hardwired, whatever type of connectivity you have, which, fortunately, more and more often that's easier to come by than maybe it used to be. So maybe not as big of an issue as it was. Let's see what other questions we might have. And I know we had a couple folks that submitted questions in advance, so we'll circle back around to those as well. But if you do have any questions regarding the work centers, please make sure to put those in the chat and we'll try to address them. One of the questions that we got ahead of time, I've got some inspectors who only want to use the inspection work center. They don't spend a lot of time in Maximo. They don't need access to any other applications. Is there a way for me to configure their security so when they sign into Maximo, they immediately just go straight to the Perform Inspection Work Center?
Yes, you can set up a default application to be a work center, and when they log in, they will be right where they need to be.
Oh, okay. So that makes it easy. And then once they're there, I guess if they did have access to something else, service requests or whatever, they could still get to that, but we can set their default to take them right where they need to go.
That's correct. And even if you have a work center as a default application, you can still navigate back to the normal Maximo.
Okay. All right. Another question here has to do with whether or not we have to pay for work centers or what the licensing is for that. And work centers are included with your licensing. So if you have licenses to Maximo, then you have licenses to work centers. Same types of rules would apply. The express users that have access mainly to the work order applications to respond and update work orders that are assigned to them. They would have access to like the work execution work center. If you've got limited users with access to inventory, then they would have the inventory work center. So the same licensing rules would apply to your classic UI users as far as what modules and applications they would have to have access to, but at least it's not an additional license fees. So somebody who's a warehouse person that might working the classic UI on their desktop when they're in the warehouse could walk out into the warehouse with their phone or tablet and log into the inventory work center, and they're not going to consume an additional license in doing that. So licensing is just basically out of the box with whatever that you might have. Another question here. Well, kind of going back to a follow-on question to the work centers being offline, and if they're not available in an offline mode, then why would we use work centers versus what we already have on the iPad or PDA? And I guess that's a little bit of just an organizational preference. As the mobile product market has matured, and I think you've probably seen this, Daniel, I know I have, it doesn't have to be a one size fits all. So different parts of the organization might use different mobile solutions, and even a single individual might use a different mobile solution depending on what they're doing. One of the nice things about the work centers is they're so intuitive and easy to use, and with the responsive screens and stuff, it makes it easy for a user to navigate through those without having a lot of training or things like that. So maybe different parts of the organization use different things or something like that. Have you seen that with some of our clients where maybe they deploy multiple mobile solutions?
Yeah, I've definitely seen people choose to use work centers, and the biggest reason they'd like to use them is that they're already included in their license. You already have it; you can use it whenever. It is a responsive design, and IBM has committed to improving it. They, constant performance and bug fixes each version, so they're getting better every time. So they are just working on it, so it is an option at least to that.
Sure, and I think the service request one, especially with the new guest user capability, will be another big win, because then you don't necessarily have to have everybody with logins to Maximo. If I can get access to a work center as a guest, then I can get, if I'm in a facility, an airport, a college campus, something like that, where I just want to see something and report it, the guest access is nice for that capability as well. So.
Absolutely.
So one of the things I remember from a while back, we had a client that was using work centers, and they wanted to put work centers on their start center because it was a user that used a little bit of classic UI and a little bit of work center UI for the inspection forms particularly. And we didn't used to be able to do that, but I think IBM has changed that. So can we put favorite applications that link into work centers now within the start center portlets?
I don't actually recall. I don't think it was possible in the past, but I'm not sure if it's been updated or not.
Okay. I know it wasn't possible in the past. I'm pretty sure now that if you are setting up your Start Center portlets, when you go to your favorite applications, there's an application type option now. And with that application type, you can choose to include Work Center links as well as just your regular classic UI links. So that's a nice new feature as well. Another question that came in online, is there a separate ear file deployment for the work centers?
There is, but during typical configurations, it will the Maximo X will be deployed during just a typical deployment. But if you are doing maybe a non-standard deployment, you might need to make sure that that gets deployed as well.
Okay, so it is a separate ear, but it should happen automatically unless I'm not following the the wizard of deployment that just will stick it out there automatically.
Exactly. And another common issue is that work centers are designed to be used, with more modern browsers. So that means that IE will sometimes have problems. So we really recommend using Chrome, Firefox, or Edge if you need a Microsoft product. Okay.
That's good to know, because that's always, browser compatibility is definitely an issue with some of the features. So another question that came in, can we create a service request by email only? Means send an email SR can be created. And the answer to that is yes. There's an email listener that can be set up that will take those inbound emails and parse those out and create service requests from them, and then kind of create a communication string so that the requester gets a notice back letting them know their service request number. And then if they have updates or additional information to send to the service request, they can do that. And of course, you can also tie in from that point in time escalations and notifications to give them status reports as their work progresses. So service requests by email is definitely an option within and that's just within the classic product. That doesn't have anything to do with the work centers specifically. Another question that came in advance, we're hearing a lot about Maximo 8. So how are the Maximo work centers shifting in the technology? I think right now it's Google Polymer, and going forward, it's going to be a different platform. Will that impact the way that we set up security and how things work with the work centers?
No, it really won't impact things going forward. But yeah, they are going to be using React.js, and they're also going to be using something called IBM Carbon, which is their open source design tool. So you should expect there to be mostly just bug fixes and performance improvements until they make that transition. But the way that you'll interact with the work center should be the same.
Okay, all right. And I think from a configuration perspective, they did roll out some basic configuration capability around the work execution and work supervision work centers, but those configurations will obviously be lost in the switch from the Google Polymer to React platform. So we're kind of advising clients not to go crazy on configuring work centers at this point, knowing that will be changing here in the near future.
Very good point.
So, let's see, a couple of other questions. Can you show the service request screen to work as a guest? I'm not exactly sure what the question is asking, but I do know that if you've logged in as a guest, you can create a service request. That's, normally when I log into service requests and I create one, if I log back into my work center as myself, I'm going to see all of my open and active requests and the status of those. So there need to be a link back to a login to be able to show status updates. Otherwise, you wouldn't necessarily want to show every service request to anybody that logged in anonymously of sorts. I do believe there's still an email tie there, just not necessarily a named user. So we'd have to look into that and follow up on that one, unless, Daniel, you've got some more insight into how that's working.
No, I don't know the specifics under that.
Yeah. All right. You've built a lot of the inspection work centers for our clients, a lot of inspection forms. Can we do default answers? I know there's a lot of different types of questions we can use now. Multiple choice, and I think didn't they roll out the ability to do kind of cascading questions where one answer leads to the next question?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do that. I'm not sure about the default answers. That I would have to get back to you on.
Okay. What are some of the more interesting inspection work centers you've configured for our clients? Do you have some favorite forms that you've built?
Well, actually, one of the most interesting was actually reporting on the inspections. So there are some pretty interesting relationships, but you can actually get a lot of great information from these inspections and report against them, which was really a fun experience.
Yeah, that was a fun experience. I remember that. All right. Let's see. We talked a little bit about modification of the work centers, adding attributes tables. So yes, you can do that, but it's very limited. I think you can switch out fields if I remember correctly, but not necessarily add. You know, if the card has 5 fields on it, you're limited to 5 fields, but you can kind of pick and choose what 5 get displayed. Is my memory on that correct?
Yeah, I think there's a limit to how much you can modify the card.
Okay. All right. So one of the things that's different with the object structures is there's the capability to put in some query changes in that, right? So I can control some of the data that gets downloaded on my work center if I want to filter by site or work type or things like that. Can we make them site specific or work group specific, things like that through those queries?
Yes, you can. You can, if you have a custom query that's controlling the status, then you can modify it however you like for different cards. But also you can limit the user's permission. So I don't believe if you had a data restriction, you could also use that to limit the amount of data that's displayed to the user. Okay, great. All right.
Very good. And then one last question on the inspection data, and then we are about out of time. So can inspection data be used to create a work order based on the condition of the asset found during inspection? And the answer to that is yes, right? I've got a create action capability that I can use.
Yes, you can set certain events that will trigger the creation of a work order.
Okay, yeah. All right. So with that, I think we are just about out of time. I'm going to switch back over here, and we have coming up in just another, I think it's next week actually, our project managers are getting together to talk about implementing Maximo in an agile environment. So that's next Thursday, the 11th. And a lot of Maximo projects end up in a waterfall, start to finish, kind of big bang rollout. But sometimes it's advantageous to do that in a more agile methodology. So our project managers are going to talk through that process and how that works out. So tune in for that. And then tune in again in 2 weeks for our next Work Center chat on inventory with Lonnie and Thomas, I think. So with that, I'm going to say thank you all very much for your time today. We hope you found this interesting. If you've got any follow-up questions, please reach out. We'll be happy to get answers to you if we didn't get time to get to your question in the chat. And thanks again. Alex, back over to you.
Amy and Daniel, thank you so much. That was a lot of great information, some great technical tips, and a lot of new feature updates. So really appreciate the information share. And we look forward to seeing you all for the rest of the series and for sure on the 11th as well for the webinar. Have a great day, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.